Ibn Khaldun died 1406, ostensibly the preeminent Islamic scholar in history, summarized 5 centuries of prior Muslim jurisprudence with regard to the uniquely Islamic institution of jihad as follows. In the Muslim community, the holy war is a religious duty because of the universalism of the Muslim mission and the obligation to convert everybody to Islam either by persuasion or by force. The other religious groups did not have a universal mission, and the holy war was not a religious duty for them, save only for the purposes of defense. Islam is under obligation to gain power over all other nations. By the time Al-Tabari died in 923 AD, the Arab Empire had already expanded from Portugal to India. After Al-Tabari's death, the Arab and Muhammadan conquests continued in Asia as well as on Christian Eastern European lands. The Christian kingdoms of Armenia, Byzantium, Bulgaria, Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, Albania, and parts of Poland and Hungary were conquered. The Muhammadan armies were finally stopped at the gates of Vienna in 1683, September 12th. These so-called holy wars, that were in fact purely wars of aggression, were pursued century after century, lasting over a millennium. Jihad, which is qital fi sabilillah, meaning fighting for the sake of Allah, is embodied in their perceived sacred ideology, linked to a series of verses in the Quran and Hadith, detailing their regulations. Both were conceived by Muhammadan jurists from the 8th to the 9th centuries onward. As we have demonstrated in our chapter 7, Jihad in Islam, the ideology of jihad separates the world into 2 irreconcilable entities: Dar al-Islam, the territory of Islam, and Dar al-Harb, the territory of war, controlled by the unbelieving kuffar. The duty of all Muhammadans is to impose Sharia Islamic law on the whole world, either by persuasion or by war, and those efforts which imply sacrifices represent the fighting for the sake of Allah. We have at hand a massive glorifying jihadi literature documented during a millennium of these successful wars of aggression. They contain innumerable descriptions written by Muhammadan historians, wherein they are recorded in detail the number of slain infidels, the enslavement of the populations, the booty in captives, cattle and movable goods, the cities that were destroyed, razed or spared and taken by treaty, and the countryside pillaged or set on fire. Battles and victories are described from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian, from Hungary to Sudan. This information is not only available in Muhammadan sources, but also by eyewitness Christian ones, which complement the Muhammadan perspective, thus giving the evidence of the victims of jihadi wars. These Christian sources are Coptic, Armenian, Jacobite, Greek, Slav, Spanish, Italian, etc. There are also Jewish sources with similar descriptions. The jihad wars occupying kuffar territories, which lasted over a millennium across 3 continents, are richly documented. Thus, it is astonishing when this well-characterized historiography is largely ignored or even denied in scholarly writings both by Muhammadans as well as by many Western historians. In the laws of Islamic governance, Al-Mawardi died 1058, a renowned Baghdadi jurist, examined the regulations pertaining to the lands of the infidel, that is, non-Muslim populations subjugated by jihad. This is the origin of the system of dhimmitude. The native infidel population had to recognize Islamic ownership on their land, submit to Islamic Sharia law, and accept payment of the poll tax, jizya. Effectively, he was repeating verbatim the charter of Umar. In a nutshell, Muhammadan Islam represents a culture of pure hate, compounded with an incredible degree of racism that denies the history and suffering of any and all of their victims. That is exactly why we never read or get any apology from any of their scholars or leaders regarding their conquests and continuing imperialism. With this necessary background, I shall now address the subjects of Janissaries and Devshirme. Janissary is a Turkish word in 2 parts. Yeni, meaning new, and Sheri means soldier, hence new troops, thus indicating exactly what they were in the beginning, an alternative to the old regular army. This standing army was created by Murad I in the 14th century, lasting until 1826, altogether about 450 years. Devshirme is also Turkish, meaning gathering. It was a diabolical system of human taxation introduced under Sultan Murad II in the 1420s. The Sultan would collect Christian boys from the Balkans and turn them into his personal slaves as elite soldiers and administrators. Hence, the soldiers were called Janissaries, and the method of either enslaving or recruiting them is called Devshirme. The Sultan needed to form the Janissary Corps because of the vulnerability of a regular army put together by free Turkoman tribal levies from different geographical areas whose loyalty was normally to their own clannish leaders. These independently minded chieftains were often tempted to oppose the power of Sultan by finding allies among the most important enemies of the Ottoman Empire. Thus, it became necessary to have paid troops loyal only to the Sultan. They became actually the new elite troops of the empire. Like the Roman Praetorian Guard, their loyalty was to the ruler of the Ottoman Empire. At least, this was the intention. The Janissaries were first and foremost Christian youth enslaved during invasions of European Christian countries and impressed into this newly instituted system. They were converted to Islam and given the best training in the arts of war, as well as a very good education to be used for administering parts of the empire. They thus became the most privileged force in the army. Because of their unique position in the empire, the Janissaries were subject to strict rules, limiting their freedom and demanding higher moral standards than usual in their society. Special laws were introduced to regulate their daily life, thus cutting them off from the ordinary civil society. Janissaries trained under strict discipline with hard labor and in practically monastic conditions in cadet schools. Despite strict rules, they enjoyed high living standards and a social status which intended to give logic and force to their loyalty. They were forbidden from ever making contact with their families. They were prohibited from marrying and having a family. They were not allowed to engage in trade. They were not allowed to grow a beard, which was the mark of a free man, but can wear a moustache. For all practical purposes, Janissaries belonged to the Sultan, carrying the title Kapikulu, door slave, indicating their collective bond with the Sultan. They were taught to consider the Corps as their home and family, and the Sultan as their father. Only those who proved strong enough earned the rank of true Janissary at the age of 24 or 25. The advantages of the Devshirme system of slave recruitment over casual enslavement is obvious. Through this system, the Ottomans were able to choose appropriate slaves from among their pool of millions of available slaves. After basic training, the Janissaries were consigned according to ability to the palace, the administrative bureaucracy, or the army. The palace education aimed to produce the warrior statesman and loyal Muslim who at the same time should be a man of letters and polished speech, profound courtesy and honest morals. But its fundamental aim was to instill complete obedience and loyalty to the Sultan. Most Devshirme are known to have come from the European parts of the empire, from Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Armenia, and other Slavic areas. Devshirme had a very negative repercussions for Slavs, Greeks, and Armenians, not only psychological but also physical, since many of the smartest, the best-looking, the most intelligent boys and sometimes girls could not enrich their own communities for centuries. Again, I would like to address our Muhammadan listeners concerning such a diabolical human taxation. Consider if this were happening to your family, when during the month of Ramadan, your holiest day, your occupier would come and pick out the best children, boys and girls, and take them by force from their pleading and crying parents who know they will never see them again. Parents who also know that they will be forcibly converted to the religion of the occupier. I wonder what your thoughts are regarding such a reversal of fortunes. Please remember that all these acts were sanctified by Sharia law. The Ottoman Empire used Janissaries in all its major campaigns, including the 1453 capture of Constantinople, the defeat of Egyptian Mamluks, and wars against Hungary and Austria. It is estimated that during the 450 years of Janissary and of Shirme, over 700,000 Christian boys and girls were abducted, enslaved, and forcibly converted to Muhammadan Islam. So much for Al-Baqarah 2.256, let there be no compulsion in religion. Like Frankenstein's monster, the very Janissary that was created to protect the Sultan became self-conscious and a threat to him. In June 1826, the Janissary Corps found out that Sultan Muhammad II was forming a new style army and revolted. The Sultan declared war on them and destroyed them. Many of the survivors were executed, others were banished. Thus ended the period of the Janissaries.